You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. Before we get started with our guest this week, Landis Wade, I need to apologize for the lateness today. After last week's fiasco, if you happen to be watching, I was a little nervous today and misclicked a button. So I apologize to Landis. I apologize to you. And, it happens. So let's begin with a new breath, and we'll go over time, if that's okay with you, Landis.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go over to comments and get that clicked and just take my time. Okay. Our returning guest today is Landis Wade. Landis is an author, the creator, and a host on the Charlotte Readers podcast, as well as a speaker. He has 35 years experience as a trial lawyer, which he uses while penning his mysteries to make authentic courtroom scenes. During his last visit, we discussed his courtroom Christmas trilogy, and in this episode, we're discussing Deadly Declarations, an indie retirement mystery based on a real historical mystery, the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. There's a goodness about Landis's writing. Yes, his mysteries have murders and lying and cheating and conspiracy and all that worldly fare, but there's also a feeling of respect, honesty, and caring integrity, if you will, that leaves you feeling good. I don't know how he does it, but I promise if you clap your hands, shout, I believe, read Mr. Wade's books, you'll find ample laughter, which is always the best medicine, and the feel goods. So thank you for the suspenseful, rollicking, and warm mystery, Landis, and welcome to Fika.
So, Vicky, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's great to be back. And I will just say that as a podcaster myself, I have failed to push the button before as well. So I understand exactly what you're dealing with. So it happens to all podcasters. It happened to me one time when I was recording with somebody, and I thought it would be nice to mute myself and then mute them when they were talking and back and forth. But it turned out I forgot to unmute, and so about half the recording didn't get made. So, this stuff happens, and I'm happy to hang around and talk.
Great, because I'm happy to have you hanging around. We don't get to talk that often, so so it's good to catch up. Now, Deadly Declarations is not a historical novel, but it's a novel with a lot of history in it. And you've actually won the North Carolina Society of Historians Award of Excellence. I didn't hear about the Deck Mech, as it's called by the cool kids, I guess. I didn't hear about the Deck Mech until I met you and learned about your books. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that haven't as well. So can you fill us all in on it, Landis?
Sure, I'm happy to. So the MECDEC, which is short for Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, is a disputed point of history unless you live in North Carolina, or more particularly in Charlotte. Although it really wasn't taught in schools much growing up, but there's a real interesting history related to this story because it pitted two of our former presidents against each other, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. In fact, John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of plagiarizing words from the MECDEC when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. So it's got a little bit of conspiracy tied to it. But the story dates back to May of 1775. During that turbulent period when we're entering the Revolutionary War, about 30 days after the shot heard around the world at the up in Massachusetts at the Old North Bridge. This is what happened in the small burg of Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, which was only about 1,100 people, and about 2/3 of them were enslaved people. This is a group of Scots, Irish, Presbyterian for the most part. They'd come over from England. They were very independent. They'd immigrated down to this area. They didn't like being told what to do. And so with everything going on in the colonies and all the issues that related to church, the church membership and that kind of thing, so they were kind of not happy with what was going on. So they called a meeting. A meeting of all the militia in the area. 2 members of each militia came. And on May 19th of 1775, they were meeting at a courthouse in what's now the center of Charlotte, North Carolina, at the square, to discuss what to do. And we didn't have Twitter at the time. We didn't have cable news. So it took an express rider 30 days to get from Massachusetts down to this part of the country in Charlotte, North Carolina, to tell what happened, to start the war. And he just happened to arrive when all these people were getting together to talk about these issues. And the secretary of the convention said, he was quoted as saying, we felt and smelt the blood of our countrymen. And they then decided through 5 resolutions to declare independence from the most powerful nation in the world at the time, England. And they announced that the next day. And then they got a guy who worked in a tavern, Captain James Jack, who knew the back roads and how to run liquor and everything, to get on a horse and take these documents to Philadelphia, to the Second Continental Congress. I will say one other thing. There was another document they adopted, which was all the resolutions that went into how they're going to govern themselves. But when he got to Philadelphia, the delegates from North Carolina, as well as many other delegates from other states, weren't quite ready for independence. Independence wasn't declared until a year later. And so they received Captain Jack. They looked at his documents, but then they said, "Thank you for your patriotism. Please go back and tell the people in your community we appreciate their patriotism, but your actions are premature." And so he went back, went home. Everybody in that area fought in the revolution, supported it in some way or the other. And it kind of got forgotten. In the year 1800, John McNeill Alexander, who was the secretary, his house burned up. And the only surviving documents of what he written down burned up as well. And so they had to sort of piece it back together by memory and some rough notes and that kind of thing. But still, they weren't out bragging about it or anything until somebody from Virginia was bragging about how much Virginia had to do with the revolution, saying North Carolina didn't have much to do. Somebody said, "Yeah, but what about this thing we did, declaring independence for anybody else?" They said, "That's not true. You didn't do that." And so they went back to John McNitt's son, who gathered documents, and he wrote he sent all the material to a North Carolina newspaper that published it, and it got picked up in a Massachusetts newspaper. And imagine this: John Adams is sitting there reading his morning paper and reads this story about the Macdeck, and he immediately writes to Thomas Jefferson. At this time, both of them had been president. They were kind of what we call frenemies. They didn't, they kind of liked each other, but they didn't, because they'd been loyal friends. But Jefferson had run against Adams and taken his position as made him a one-term president. But they stayed in touch and they wrote to each other every day. And side trivia here, but they died on the same day, 50 years to the day after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But in this period of time, they were kind of back and forth. And one of the back and forths was, Adams writes to Jefferson and says, "I can't believe, I enclose to you the most curious mystery I've ever heard about in my life." He says, "I cannot believe that this document was concealed from me to this day," as if to say, "Thomas Jefferson, you concealed this document from me." And what he's saying is, look, there were some people that were that worked with Jefferson, who were loyal to him. And one of those people was a delegate from North Carolina. Might Jefferson have known about this and not shared it with others because he didn't want people to know sooner about independence? But in any event, Adams went around accusing Jefferson to his friends and others of actually copying, if not the words, the very spirit of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. And so it became a disputed issue over time, and I could go on. There are lots of conspiracies that relate to this, but there were a lot of eyewitnesses to what happened, and it's just a real interesting story. You can Google the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, or as Vicky said, you can look in the back of the book. But there were, I will tell you one other interesting thing about the story is because at this point in time, unlike today, when they were looking back only 50 years of the revolution, a lot of different people and states were trying to claim credit for what had happened. And so the concern was in Virginia that if they found a document that was evidence of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, it could actually tarnish Thomas Jefferson's reputation. This is before Jefferson, was known for sleeping.
Other things that tarnished his reputation.
Right. This was when his reputation was very high. Not to say that Jefferson didn't do a lot of good things, but at first Jefferson, knew that he was kind of writing this by committee and was looking at a lot of different sources. But then people praised him for what he'd written to the point that he sort of took ownership of the Declaration of Independence wholly and entirely, in the sense that once this came out that there might have been something wrong with it, he would have been the one to take the whole blame for whatever it was, he may have done if it was plagiarism. So the Virginians were out to prove the North Carolinians were wrong and this never existed. The North Carolinians were out to prove that it did exist, and there were lots of conspiracies around it. And here's one conspiracy I'll leave you with before we go to the next question here. There was an ambassador to England from the U.S. in about the 1838 time period. And he was a friend of Thomas Jefferson's. He went to the University of Virginia, and his name was Andrew Stevenson. And some people from Virginia went over there and wanted to get their hands on a document. They'd heard about a document that had been written in the summer of 1775 to the Earl of Dartmouth from the then governor of North Carolina, the Royalist governor. And in that document, he'd said, let me enclose here with you a newspaper article showing the most contemptuous treasonous act of yet in the colonies here in North Carolina in a county called Mecklenburg. And so they were trying to find the newspaper article to see what it said. Did it say that it was the MacDec, or did it say something else entirely? They were hoping to find a document that didn't have the words independence in it, but might have done something a bit treasonous. Well, if you go to the British Public Records Office today and you go find this document and you turn it over, you'll see a little notation that says the newspaper article was checked out by Andrew Stevenson on such and such a date, and the document was never returned. And so the question is, if it did prove that the MacDec did not exist, why wasn't it shared with the world? If it proved that it did exist, maybe somebody concealed it. So anyway, it's kind of like, was this the first great American cover-up? Was this MacDec gate? Is this a lot of conspiracy, a lot of fun surrounding this? And I thought, oh, this is great. This is the kind of thing, not only because it's interesting history, but the kind of thing that would be ripe for a thriller novel, right? To try to uncover this mystery.
That had been going on. It's like a political thriller, but in a historical sense. So you took this, some of the names such as Stevenson and that pop up in the book, but that is the fictitious part. You took this conspiracy and thought, what do I think the answers are? Right?
Yes.
And we have to remember that people at that time, their conspiracies were even harder to get across because it wasn't so, in the old days, you couldn't just sit down at a computer and start Googling things. I mean, all these messages in that would take ages to be written over there and over here. So it was a lot easier to cover things up then, I would think, than it is in today's computer.
Yeah, there were, but no less of a climate in the sense of people trying to gain the upper hand and prove someone else is wrong and try to.
Yeah, no. Those feelings obviously were still there.
Yeah, and trying to rewrite history and all that kind of thing. It was even present back then. But like just to be fair, I mean, there are lots of explanations for why both documents could exist and why it wasn't plagiarism. But still, this thing was going on, and I thought, okay, we'll kind of delve into this and see where it might. I like to joke that the mystery of the MacDec has never been solved until now, until you read Daily Declarations.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, I mean, it just when it comes down to it, it's silly, people. that people, I don't know. I'm not saying I believe it or not, but for some reason, whatever, I kind of like the idea that it was written in North Carolina first. I have no idea why. I just
and to add a little context to that, if you look at the North Carolina flag, even to this day, you'll see the date May 20th, 1775, in the upper left-hand corner of the flag, and that's because that date meant something to the people of North Carolina, and it's remained on the flag ever since then. And it's also why we have license plates that say "First in Freedom" in North Carolina, and also "First in Flight."
It's sort of like a passive aggressive license plate. So in the book, there are lots of reminders in the courtroom, whatever, about saying this is where it was signed, and originally, and so you're telling me this now. So is it so out there in North Carolina? Like, do they have all of these reminders that it was signed there first?
So essentially, because Charlotte is, is considered sort of a New South city. We've never preserved a building. We tear most everything down and build up skyscrapers. It's a banking center. A lot of people have moved here from different parts of the country, over 1 million people. And then you got a metropolitan area, 2.5 million or something. And so it's a huge area. And so I would wager to guess that, maybe more than half, maybe more than that, don't even know the story, because it's a big community. There is a statue of Captain James Jack close to uptown. There are monuments and placards in different places, but you got to look for them, right? You'll be walking down the road and you'll see different things. And there's an old settler cemetery where some of the founders were buried and some of the signers were buried. And then there's these little churches all around Charlotte that were called the Seven Sisters, the Presbyterian churches, where some of the Presbyterians were buried who were instrumental in this. So yeah, you have to look, but you got to look hard. It's like history hiding in plain sight.
That's what you say in the novel. Yeah. Okay. Tamara says hello, Tamara. Brian's here. Okay. Brian says, Landis, I enjoyed the excerpt from Deadly Declarations that was included in Death by Podcasting, which you co-wrote. Alas, the ebook isn't available on Kobo, my preferred ebook seller. Well, Brian, it just now Brian's a regular.
I can tell you why. I think I just Deadly Declarations was initially put into I think it was the Amazon KDP, and I took it out of there in February, but then I got caught up in working on some other things and forgot to then upload it to the other site. So it's out there. It's not exclusive anymore. I just haven't done what I need to do. So I will.
He was so excited that the others were on Kobo, because no one ever puts anything Kobo. That I think the disappointment is. Now you're making people take notes, Brian. Okay. Do things everybody.
It's a good reminder. It's a good reminder. Thank you.
So you were interested in this piece of history. Have you always been interested in history? Like, were you aware of this story in depth before you started this book?
Yeah, I've always been interested in history. I was a history major in college, and that helped me go to law school and become a better writer and all that kind of thing. I enjoy watching history specials. When this story sort of surfaced again in my life, it was because I interviewed Scott Seifert, a local historian in Charlotte, about the Mech Deck. He'd written a nonfiction book about it, and we started getting into it. And I was like, man, this is amazing. You mean this happened and this conspiracy? And you mean Adams accused Jefferson of plagiarism? And Jefferson said, the secretary, John McNitt, if he's real, he needs to prove it, kind of thing. I mean, it's, all this stuff going on. I said to Scott, are you going to write a novel about this now? He said, no, you go ahead and write it. And I said, well, if I write it, I'm going to need some help to make sure I don't mess the facts up. And he was kind enough to say, sure, I'll take a look. So he was one of the persons who looked at an early draft of the book and gave me some feedback. And so, yeah, it was something that I learned more about later. And it just kind of, I didn't have a through line for this mystery. I'd set it in retirement community, which I know we're going to talk about, but I didn't have the through line. And once I found the mech deck as the through line for the book, it just kind of really opened up for me, and I really started writing much faster.
Oh, I can see that, because the information and yeah, the book is so smooth. You know that behind it was a force.
Yeah.
A force. This book has a force.
Appreciate that.
So I love the fact, probably due to age, that this book takes place in a retirement community. And there's a lot of readers out there. It's one of the larger demographics, because people have more time to read when they retire and they're older, and it you wanted to read your whole life, but you never had time, right? And now you can sit and read all these books. And it gives you a glimpse into the possibility of a second life. And that's great for younger readers, because, it helps them to understand. I don't know. I always make friends with people who are like 10 years older as a reference. So I can have yes, Brian, 10 years older than Vicky. No, so that I can have an idea of what's coming up, right? Because life goes through waves. It's different, but whatever. Now, you are the protagonist in this book. Craig Travail is a retired lawyer. He retired under duress. You chose to retire. Is retirement what you expected to be? Are you enjoying it? Are you happy, or even happier than you were as a lawyer?
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm much busier than I was as a very busy lawyer. And that's one thing I found out about retirement and people in retirement, is there are a lot of things that will consume your time and that will allow you to use your talents and your creative energies, and you start filling that time up. And I've filled it up with lots of things, writing, podcasting. We downsized and bought a place in Durham, where I'm podcasting today, to be closer to my grandson. So we're in 2 or 3 locations, learning to live more of an urban lifestyle. Even rode the train from Charlotte up here this week to do it. Just hadn't done that in a long time. And so yeah, retirement is treating me fine. Although they did elect me to the board of this homeowners association up here, and that's been time consuming. I don't recommend that to anybody. Although I have to tell you that, as frustrated as it's been being on the board, I've developed some new material for my next book when it comes to the HOA component of the retirement community, because there's lots of conflict among residents about what the rules should or should not be. So anyway, to answer your question,
does it get deadly?
Well, I hope it doesn't get deadly in real life, but I can certainly make it deadly in the novel. But yeah, so it's been fun. And you're right, I did pick a protagonist who was 65 years old, a lawyer, gets kicked out of his big law firm. And the reason I did that is because I was going through this idea of retiring from a big law firm. I talked to other people about it, and I talked about retirement communities. Not that I was ready, but I was at the time moving my parents into a retirement community. And my dad at the time, who was still living, who was 86 years old, said, well, Landis, I don't know if I want to go live with the old people, and I said, Dad, you're 86 years old, and, so I saw the emotion of that. My mother didn't want to leave her house of 50 years, and the emotion of parting with that. And so all these emotions are tied up in this change, right? This change of career, this change of lifestyle. It goes to your identity. And I thought, okay, let's put Craig Travail in this setting. He doesn't want to be there. His mindset is that people in retirement, it's a very ageist mindset, by the way. People in retirement communities have nothing left to offer. They're only there looking for the next meal. They got one foot in the grave and one foot, with a hand out to find out, what's for dinner. And that's his mindset going into it, right? But then over time, like any good character arc, he's going to have to come to terms with reality. And maybe he will change, maybe he won't. But that's one of the underlying themes of the book is, what's Craig Travail going to do and realize about this thing called retirement and the people who live in retirement communities. And as an aside of that, I would say that, some of the smartest people in the world are people over 65 and 70 years old. And if you want to know the answer to something, that's probably where you should be going to ask. And if you need someone to help you solve a mystery, why not go there and rely on their expertise? Anyway, I thought, so for these novels that I'm going to write in this retirement community, if I need some expertise, I'll just move somebody into the retirement community and rely upon them.
No, but it is true. Your attitude about older people will come back to bite you when you're older if you are not careful and adjust, which is why it's important for younger people to read these books as well, to get a glimpse, because it's not the end. And you talked about a lot of things that you were doing now to keep busy, but I feel like there's a lot of fishing involved there too, Landis. So
yeah, I do these other things when I'm not fishing. That's right.
Let's stick with the priorities and be honest about them. And I think every character, it's important for characters to grow. And I feel like this is how Craig's growth curve will be, or it doesn't. As a reader, I would just like it to. I'm just Landis. I would like to see him grow and accept it, because it is such a vibrant time. And yes, we have gotten so busy Googling, we haven't stopped to ask the old people. So I say old people because I have no problem being called old. I think, it's you don't, there isn't that urgency, even though, don't want to say this, but you have less time left. But I feel like there isn't that urgency, that need to do. And so you get to focus on the things that you want to do instead, if you're lucky. So that's
and
okay.
Just not to pick on lawyers too much, but I do say in the book that when lawyers get to be about 65 years old, they need to retire. I've seen too many of them hang around beyond their expiration date. And one of the characters in the book's jokes is kind of like, the song Hotel California. They can check out, but they can never leave after they get beyond that date. So, so it's good to get out. There's a real world out there. Lots of other things to do. If you can afford to do it, great. Get out there and experience some other things. And who knows, maybe you'll run into a mystery that somebody needs you to help solve, and which is really the thing that got Craig Travail out of his doldrums when these two other characters of the retirement community shook him pretty good and said, "We need your help. We got to solve this mystery."
Well, I think, and even if you don't have a lot of finances on hand, which is sometimes the situation when you get older, especially in these times, it doesn't cost. You can go to the library, you can go on Gutenberg, you can look for those Amazon specials. Reading does not cost you that much. Writing doesn't cost you that much. There's a lot of things out there. I know that I was waiting to get my seniors discount at the thrift stores, and I have it now. And they were like, well, you can't have this card like this. I'm like, give it to me. Okay, give it to me now. I've been waiting a long time for that. So you can still work and find a lot out there to do. I don't mean work. I mean work at finding things to do. But definitely, as you said, the lawyers, I don't think that's the only profession. Although, we all like to knock them. I think it's anybody that has worked hard for those positions. They've worked hard for those positions. That's who they identify themselves as. And it's hard to let go, right?
It's hard. It's hard to stop asking the question, what do you do? Because you've been answering that question for many years, and what you do sort of becomes your identity. And it's much better to, I think, or more interesting to me to find out what somebody enjoys doing than sort of, what they do. Now, if they enjoy doing their daily job, that's fine. They can talk about that. But a lot of times if you ask that question, they're not going to talk about their work. They're going to talk about those other things that they really, whether it be travel, whether it be writing, whether it be music, whether it be films, whatever it may be, playing with their grandchildren. Those are the things that cause people's eyes to light up when you're having conversations with them.
Yes, that's it. It's always been a thing to me that what you do is then decided who you are. When you yeah, your interests, your passions, it is a much better question to ask, what are you interested in, than
Mhm.
what do you do, I think. Anyways.
Exactly.
Okay. Dave would like to know, if this document was really found, what impact would it have today?
So that's an interesting question. A lot of the scholars and the people who've written about the mech deck really kind of admit that it's not going to change U.S. history in today's terms. It's not like Thomas Jefferson's reputation is going to take a huge dive. He took a pretty good hit in the 2000s with the Sally Hemings deal. It's just going to prove that he's more human perhaps, but in fairness to him too, he was looking at a lot of sources at the time, and it wasn't unusual for people to do that when they're writing documents that are going to have an importance to, an issue for government. So I don't think it would really change much about U.S. history or be that kind of aha moment. But in the time of it, it was really important to the people involved, and almost to the point that it could result in what we call them's fighting words. But it's pretty much an interesting historical fact. If it had come out sooner, it could have changed the course of history then. That is, if they had pressed the point further rather than just gone back and gotten involved in fighting the war, and it had caused us to declare independence sooner rather than later. We don't know what the outcome of that would have been, because maybe they would have sent more troops from England. Maybe they would have responded more harshly sooner. Who knows how all that would have played out.
So, anyway, I think it would make a difference to the descendants, if they're on the side in the playground while they're saying, "No, my dad wrote it." But I think, yeah, at the time and the strategy. Good morning, Vicky and Mr. Wade. Hi, Robin. What was it like being a lawyer? It must have been very interesting. So you're going to make him miss it again if he comes up with that. You were a corporate lawyer, right? You didn't do
No. I was a
no?
trial lawyer. I was a trial lawyer. I
Oh,
was not a
I
criminal.
mean, but for
Right.
corporations, did you do any like?
Yeah. So I did a wide variety. Well, most of my work was trial work for companies that were fighting with each other about money, contracts, disputes. I did handle employment cases, sexual harassment, termination cases. Very rarely early in my career, I did some work for employees in that regard. I did some pro bono work that was domestic violence, representing some women who had been the victims of domestic violence, but mostly all related to trial work. And yes, there were interesting times, interesting moments when you were in the courtroom, but unfortunately, it's not Perry Mason every day. It's like every other job. 90% of it, can sometimes be more, the grunt work, getting it done, doing the research, gathering the materials. The exciting stuff happens, when the curtain goes up. You're arguing a motion in court, you're arguing before the North Carolina Supreme Court, you're arguing a case before a jury. And, the rest of it is depositions and preparation and all that kind of thing. So it's like anything else. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting moments, but a lot of it's just work.
Just boring old work. But there has to be, I mean, when you win, it's winning. So there has to be, like, was there a balance of energy that you had to learn so that if you did lose a case, it wasn't the end of the world, as opposed to winning a case? Like, did you have to go through a learning curve with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this could apply to any profession, whether you don't win the deal, you don't win the sale, you don't, whatever. When you work on something, you're so close to it for so long, and you come out on the losing end, it's tough, right? Because you spend so much time working on it. The thing about the law, though, and this is one of the things you have to kind of convince yourselves of, even though it's you still carry around the loss. It's that you can't control the facts, right? You can't control the law. The only thing you can control is how hard you work and what kind of case you can put on for your client. And if you can do the best you can and you still lose, then, well, sometimes, you're going to lose. There are certain facts that the jury takes into account, and they give the win to the other side. And, if you really appreciate the system and think it works, and you can give yourself a few years to look back on it, and you can maybe understand how they came to that conclusion. But in the very moment, it's hard. It's right. It's like, the other side scored one more point than you did, right? And you came in second. And it's like, what was that old movie, Ricky Bobby? It's like, if you're second, you're last, or if you're not first, you're last. And so that's how you sometimes feel in the moment. At the same time, like anything else, all you can do is try to do your best.
And just keep going. Okay. We'll just put it up here so we can all. Is this interesting to hear you talk about the time scales at the time? We're so used to thinking in terms of instant communication that it's hard to grasp the effect of a week, a month-long delays. It is. It's amazing how quickly we adjust to newness in some ways, right? Like now, banking cards. I remember when I used to have to go to the bank on Friday and figure out how much money I would spend for the week and get it out. I can't even imagine living without debit now. Like, it is. So, yeah,
I agree. I find myself carrying less cash than I used to before. And sometimes you need, to buy, a soft drink or a piece of candy. You look in your wallet, there's nothing in it, and you feel kind of bad for using your credit card for $2.20 or something,
Not even that. There are children roaming the streets with soccer and baseball teams, and they come to your door, and you're like, scraping down the last penny, trying to, purchase their chocolate bar so that they can have a life. So it is a big. So when we talk about this the growth curve that we all go through, one of the interesting things I found about the book is that two of the characters went to high school together. Now this is like 55 years ago or whatever, but the one character says, we've always been in competition. And I thought about that. I thought when we're growing up, there's always the argument, is it nurture or nature? And then that person is created. But does our lives between becoming an adult and going on to our second life as a retired individual or older individual, will that get in the way? Our experiences, like you said, it's hard for lawyers to let go. Do you have to take some time just to say, okay, I'm going to forget all about that and just become a new person?
Well, so you're talking about two characters in the book, one of whom is Sue Ellen Parker, and Sue Ellen Parker's and Sue Ellen Parker is the most despised resident at the Indy because she tries to control everything. And then you've got Harriet Keaton, who is part of the threesome that with Craig Travail and the other character we put together with them. And so they went to school together. They were all, both very successful, but they hung around in different groups, different kinds of awards, and they find themselves in retirement back together again. And so you got these old jealousies springing up. And, who's ever had a situation who can't help themselves say, I never did like that person, Well, they're probably thinking back to something that happened a long, long time ago that they've just never gotten over because they've never had a chance to talk with them about it much detail as they've gotten more mature. And so in this case, I thought, let's put two of those characters together and see what happens, see what kind of sparks fly. And early on, they fly in a little scene where Sue Ellen's trying to take away Harriet Keaton's bird feeder. So, as part of the retirement community. So, it's a fun thing. And then you find out more as you read the novel about the relationship between them. That might not be what you thought it was. So, yeah.
Well, we all knew a Sue Ellen. So I was Team
Yeah.
Harriet for a good amount of that book. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I'm still Team Harriet. I like Harriet.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a good character. And so yes, those kind of thoughts, I think, to me, when I read that, it was like a wake-up call that, sometimes you have to let go of those thoughts that you've developed over the
Hmm.
years because they just
Hmm.
stop you from seeing the newness. It could have been how much were the third, well, but it was, yes, I quite
Hmm.
liked that whole idea of
Hmm.
having to let go of those past biases, if you will. You can't
Hmm.
go on to the next part with the past bias. I just I was going to ask Landis what kind of books he likes to read because I'm honestly well, not judging, but I'm honestly seeing a lot of correlation between what people read and who they are. But then when I looked at the back of your book today, it
Hmm.
told me. So I'm like, so when you just said them's fighting words, it made me
Hmm.
think because you like westerns. Like
Yeah, I like a lot of different types of books. Obviously, I've been reading a lot of books for the podcast, interviewing over 500 authors. So I like to be introduced to new themes and new genres. When I was younger, and I would escape the practice of law and go to the beach, I loved taking Louis L'Amour books with me and reading, westerns. But I also read all kinds of thrillers and mysteries. I still enjoy doing that. And if you're going to be a writer, you should really write what you love to read. And so I don't know that I'm going to be writing any westerns, but there might be a flair of that perhaps in some of the scenes that you might bring into a thriller type book. But yeah, I've enjoyed one of my favorite books, which is I do enjoy character driven books as well. And one of my favorite books is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, just because it's an epic adventure. It's this cattle drive that starts in Texas and goes all the way to Montana, and all these characters and what they have to do to make it. But it's really a kind of a thriller too, because they got a lot of obstacles to overcome to make this journey, and it's got some history components to it as well. I love historical fiction, so all of that comes into play with what I do as a writer. It's just reading, and I can sit down and read a good fun mystery, a good fun thriller, a good fun western or historical piece. I'm not as much. I like to watch some sci-fi every now and then, and the old Star Treks and stuff, but I don't read as much sci-fi.
Well, and that's why they have the subgenres, right? It's like his
Right.
Western thriller or
Right.
whatever, so you can have all of that together. And
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about genres, now you won the Cozy Mystery Award for 2022, was it? The
I
year?
think that's
Was it
right.
last
Thank you.
year or what?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that just when I read that, I was like, wait, whoa, because didn't see it as a cozy mystery. And then I realized I have biases myself that you have to, sort of go in there and rip out every so often. And it's because I see it as a more female genre,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then I sat there and said, okay, here's this guy. He's an amateur. He has a dog. All sidled up for me. Now, did you start off just writing a mystery? When they gave you the award, were you surprised you had written a cozy mystery, or did you have an eye on the market?
So I try not to write necessarily with an eye on the market, but when you've always got to figure out where you're going to place the book, right, and on what shelf it's going
You
to go.
have to, yeah.
I like to think of the books that I enjoy writing, or even my Christmas series is they're a little bit cozy, but with a thrill, right? So, you're going to have what I think makes it more of a cozy is there's not blood and guts on the page, right? There's a body in the first chapter, but you don't see it dismembered. You don't see blood everywhere. It's not a hard scrabble detective kind of novel. So there's a little bit of coziness in there because you're dealing with, a unique setting, a retirement community, right? You're dealing with people who are dealing with amateur detectives, as you have in this particular case. And yet, I like to ramp it up a lot. So there's that thriller aspect of it when they're running for their lives later in the book. Kind of a national treasure type situation.
Yes, I can see that now. I loved National Treasures.
Right. Yeah.
We once went to Philadelphia, and I tried to recreate all the places he went with the kids, but there are longer distance between some of those places than they made it look
right.
on the film. It's like, oh, he just runs here and there, and it's like, no, the reality was nothing like the film.
Yeah.
So you shelved it under indie, but under cozy, but it was something that came up.
Well, I'm actually kind of proud of the fact that it won some awards in other categories as well. So
right.
It's not limited to just the cozy category. It's really most places probably just shelved as a mystery.
Oh yeah, or
a thriller.
Yeah, that's what surprised me. I'm not wanting you to
don't package in too
box
much.
You in, to categorize you, but it was just like, oh, I can see that after the fact, but it isn't. It definitely has. There are, say, the scene in the barn, for example, that is very, very suspenseful and action filled and like a thriller, and it is. So yeah, I think sometimes, like everything else in the world, we're getting too labeled. Like, this is a book that you should read on Wednesday if it's raining.
Right.
I'm with you. I mean, I read a lot of different books, and I'm finding a lot of. I am not that big of a science fiction reader either, but I am finding some that really appeal to me. So you don't know. Experiment, people, and whatever you read, you're my kind of reader. There's no shaming reading here. Okay.
And while we're making recommendations here, I read a series of books. People may have heard of it. It's The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. These books are set in London, pensioners, a little bit different take, but they're very good. He doesn't need any support from me. He's selling millions of books, but they're a lot of fun, very, very character-driven books, but the same kind of thing. They're set in a English retirement community, and the characters are like, one of the women is a former, MI agent, and you got another one who was a union boss at one time, and you got another one who was a psychologist, and another one who was a nurse. And that group of four decides, on Thursdays they're going to get together and look at the local paper and see what murders have happened, and see if they can solve them. So it's kind of a fun little book, and it's kind of a thriller too, but it's also got that cozy aspect to it.
And once again, proving that there is so much wisdom from so many years of experience that just comes together. Okay, so while we're doing recommendations, Brian said you might like Queen Bee. Oh, I passed that on Netflix. It's about a retirement home.
Okay.
I think it was Netflix. Okay. I am not going to say the name Netflix because they're not paying me any money to. So if they would like me to mention their name, no. And Dave wants to know if you like Clive Cussler.
I love Clive Cussler. I read, as a younger person, those were the books, in addition to the Westerns, I took to the beach with me. I think I read all of the Numa series books, and then I got into the Mitch Rapp series, and I love a series. And the underwater books that Clive Cussler wrote, I thought were very creative.
Okay, so next time I'm just going to have Dave talk to you between tricorn hats and and Clive Cussler. It's a thing. The American. Oh no, that was 2021. So in 2022, you won Best Indie Novel, I believe. You won something in 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
That's in my computer and I can't get it out right now. But
That's
But
right.
you did win, I think, best indie at some point, didn't you?
I think one of the awards was one of the indie awards, yes, for the book, and I'm very grateful for all the awards. But really, just the fact that because they were coming in, that just means people are reading it. I'm grateful to have people that read it and enjoy the story. That's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's it. The awards are lovely, but you want to hear, and he wants to hear whether you like the book or not. Whether, I mean, reviews are nice. I can't tell you to write a review because I'm very far behind on my but they are nice because they up the algorithm. But also, if you're too shy or whatever, just go on his social media on Facebook or whatever and say, "I really like that book. I'm out here. I'm reading. You're not alone."
Thank you. Thank you.
So I said there is, and we got into the cozy aspect, but it's not even just cozy. I just, I'm trying to understand this warmthness. It was the same with the Christmas, the Christmas
Mm.
books. There is just this warmthness, this calmness, and I hate saying that because I don't want people to think they're not boring. There is suspense. There is page turning action. There are thrills. There's even gunfire. This is what gets me somewhere behind all of this. There's just this good feeling. I end up putting the book down and feeling good. Now, your trial lawyer in the book mentions that he has a demeanor that he uses to calm down and to give clients confidence. And so I have to ask you, not that I'm picking on Lars, but is this some kind of Jedi mind trick that you're playing on us with your lawyer powers? Or is it intentional? Or do you think it's just who you are that comes across?
Well, first of all, thank you. But I was always much more uptight, type A personality, wanting to be fully prepared, wanting to win in court, wanting to, if somebody comes at me, I come back at them. But my dad, who was a lawyer, didn't retire until about 86 years old from the practice of law. He was very much sort of a Southern gentleman lawyer and could get along with pretty much anybody. And you know, when you write, you're sort of inspired by different people when you're writing characters. I was inspired by my dad's sort of even keel presence in the face of disaster and controversy, and I think I'll try to channel some of him into this particular character, and so I did that, and I did that with other characters as well, people that I've known, family members. One of the characters who is sort of a gossip queen, Carrie Roberts. My aunt, Carrie Mae Roberts, was a gossip queen, and my cousins don't mind me saying that; they know that, and so
Well, she was proud of it, right? She knew
yeah.
she knew the tea.
She knew what was going on, right? And she was a big talker. So you kind of try to channel sometimes, people that you've known or people that you meet into these characters, and hopefully at the end of the day, no matter what you're writing or what you're reading, you're going to feel something for these characters, something that helps you understand who they are and how they click. And I felt like, for these characters that are in retirement, they've been through a lot, so they're probably different people now than they were, earlier on in their careers, and we're all continuing to learn, I hope. But I think without being too sentimental in the book, I try to show that these characters have feelings, that they connect and then disconnect and then they connect again, and it's part of just this thing called life.
I don't feel as sentimental. And actually, that's funny because the term Southern gentleman, it came to me, but I thought I'm not going to say that in case I'm saying something wrong. So there is that feeling, almost like I also consider Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life and whatever, that kind of, like, for example, it won't ruin the plot. At one point, there's, they're in the courtroom and a woman comes in and the gentleman I think it was the writing expert. I can't quite remember. Anyways, he stands up and waits for her to sit before proceeding to, like, there's just all these little things that just you're like that they just add up until you're thinking this is a nice place. So despite the murder and the gun going off and whatever,
right.
this is just a nice world. And so I think I said this with the Christmas things. I know I keep going on about it, but it's just and so you hate I'm going to use hate for this particular thing because from the beginning, when I want to say this, in this world, it's like it's cool to be cynical. It's cool not to believe in it. There's this whole thing. So you don't want to say that. But then I looked up the term goodness in the dictionary and it said honest, integrity, all of these things. And I'm like, maybe we need heroes that reflect that, not just the muscles and the strength, just that goodness. So
yeah. And one thing I hope too is that even though we have what I like to call the evildoer, the bad guy, the
villain,
the villain, the one who's trying to frustrate everything. I hope that when people read the book, they understand a little bit more about why he is who he is. And because it's not, and I don't want to give anything away here, but
life, like as we said, life creates you, right?
Yeah.
And then you get and you don't have time. You're like paying bills, taking care of kids, running to the grocery store, and there is just a very busy time. Although lately, it's a very busy time, and then you have time to stop and think and reflect. And so I think you did build an understanding of why he is the way he is. I'm not sure that I personally think that justifies it.
No. But as long as you understand it, right? Yeah.
I understand it, and it's a common story. I mean, much in the way that Jefferson didn't want to let go of the fact that he wrote the Declaration, whether he did or didn't, but he was just adamant. That's what I've done. That's who I am. That's why I am, and that is it. So you said you are writing a second mystery. You're so close. You don't shoot this information out on your Facebook, Landis, or your website. So I'm like, does he? But you are writing it. And is it going to be about a homeowners association? Like, have you decided that yet?
So, I've gotten off a little bit with the last year because of the downsizing, the move, and taking care of my mother and doing some other things. But I've been researching a second book in this same series where I'm going to bring these characters back. They're going to deal, I hope, if I can complete the research and get more written, they're going to deal with the time period around the 1830s in Charlotte, which is the gold rush period in Charlotte, which kind of puts Charlotte on the map because in that time, gold was discovered on the East Coast about 30 miles from Charlotte. The little kid who found a 17-pound gold nugget in a stream, it sat as a doorstop for 3 years because they didn't know what to do with it. But eventually, they started figuring out how to mine for gold, and they started mining a lot in the 1820s. And there's still underground gold shafts in uptown Charlotte, and we're probably going to find a body in one of them early in the book and deal a little bit with what happened during that time period in Charlotte.
So no, that sounds cool as well. So another historical, and you know what, you're going to bring tourists out that way. And I don't think I've ever been to Charlotte. I know I went to Asheville to a Y camp there for a thing with the kids, and I know that was beautiful. And my husband drove transport, so we used to travel through. So we didn't always get to stop at places, but beautiful state.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice and green and very nice. So, okay. And so we have deadly declarations. We have, here we go. death by podcast. That if you happen to be a podcaster, if you happen to be an author, if you happen to read a light, if you know the world of anything to do with books, you're going to love this. Okay. I mean, if I'm now looking a little suspiciously at Landis and you've read this book, you will understand why. It doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it anyways. Lots of pulp culture references. It's just a fun rainy Sunday afternoon book, I would say, which is an important thing to have in your section. I don't have I don't have the hard copies for the Christmas trilogy, but I would, before Christmas, anytime of the year, but specifically before Christmas, if you're starting to get a little stressed and everything with everything going on, grab those.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Vicky. Thank you.
Oh, and you have your podcasts, The Charlotte Readers.
We have a podcast. We're approaching our 400th episode this summer, and we've got a website. You can go listen to a lot of different authors and a lot of different genres talk about their books and their writing.
And it's just go to just put Landis Wade and his website will pop up, but that will have where to go for everything else.
That's right.
Right. And I saw an interesting thing, a story slam while I was looking at your fish images. Just quickly, what is a story slam?
So a story slam, at least the one that I recently participated in, they have a theme for the night. They sell tickets. They fill up the place with about 100 people. They have, if you want to tell a story, you come in and you put your name in the hat, and out of the 20 or 30 that put it in, they draw 8 names. And then those people are supposed to follow these directions. They've got to tell a story in 5 minutes or less with no notes on stage, and then they are judged compared to the others. And I had a story that I'd written that I thought would be fun to tell about when I was a young kid. My dad took me and my brother down the Cape Fear River on what was supposed to be a 3-day boating and camping trip, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And so I went to this thinking, okay, I can use my notes, and put my name in the hat. Found out when they were explaining the directions that it was no notes. And I turned to my wife. I said, well, I saw about 30 people who put things in there, so I'll be fine. I'm not going to get selected. And so I was selected, and I had to get up on stage and do it. So it's another form of storytelling. I enjoyed doing it. I knew the story pretty well because it's been a kind of a story of our family for many years. My dad had wanted to take this trip, but didn't know anything much about camping, knew a little bit about boating, but didn't know much about what the Cape Fear River held. The fact that it had locks in it, yeah, he kind of knew about that. He didn't know they had big waterfalls next to him. He didn't know exactly where they were located. He didn't know our boat was going to break down. He didn't know, things were going to. So, and he always wanted to go back and finish that trip. And later in his life, when he had a little bit of dementia, we were cleaning out the house to move to that retirement community I was telling you about. And I found in the attic this old box of 35 millimeter films. And on the side of one was marked Cape Fear River, 1969. And I pulled it out and looked at it. And I said, this can't be, oh yeah, we did take that little projector with us and took some. So we took it downstairs, took out the Bell and Howell projector, which was there, and it still worked after 50 years. Plugged it in, turned it on, and put it up on the wall, and it started flickering, and you had these grainy black and white images of me and my brother and my dad getting in a boat and all this stuff. And I said, Dad, come in here, come in here. And he came in and he looked at the wall, and he was a little confused at first because he was having a hard time remembering some things. But then it kind of clicked. I mean, he could remember all the way back, and he looked at that grainy image on the screen, and he got this huge smile on his face, kind of like the smile he had when we were out on the boat when things were great and he was with his boys. And he turned to my brother and I, he's 86 or 87 or something. We're in our late 50s and early 60s. He said, hey, you boys want to go finish that trip? And so I got up and told this story as part of this story slam, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a little nerve-wracking because you're on stage and you're doing something different than you do as a writer. But I think it's good to challenge yourself, and they're fun to go watch too.
to do something, yeah, to and
Yeah,
to and yeah, because I mean 5 minutes, unless you know the story, is a long time to go cold without
yeah,
any
right.
oh, this is a technical question. Dave wants to know, did you ever get any of that film put onto digital so that you could watch it more easily, or
Yeah, I do have it on digital now. Yes, yes.
okay, there you go, Dave. A technical question. That's the answer here. We go into the most detailed things here on Fika.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
never know.
yeah.
Landis, are we good? Um,
Yes.
yeah. So all the regular places for all of the books, and you will be getting you will be getting deadly declarations on Kobo.
Yep, yep,
Yes,
we
notes.
will. Yeah,
Yes. So thank you
yeah,
so much. It is always so much fun talking to you. And oh, he also has a writing series, uh, writers quotes, from
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
quotes from
it's the Right Quote series. There are 8 books in it. These are quotes from authors we interviewed on the podcast. The first book, The Writing Life, should be free, I think, on all platforms, including Kobo. So you can download the first one for free in digital format. And it's got what writers think about this thing called the writing life. And then the other books are broken down into various categories related to writing and what these authors said about them.
so that's definitely a look into. I have to look into that one. Yeah, myself. So Landis, take care. It was an honor. I'm sorry for keeping you for the delay in the
No,
beginning. May is just turning out to be a month here at Fika.
this is,
So you take care and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
thank you, Vicky. Pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye. And for the rest of you, yeah, we're going to get it perfect one of these days. Until then, may your stories be sweet and your coffee hot. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you soon. And now I have to do